We often talk about political division in our country, and our next guest has a theory behind what may be fueling that situation. Chris Hayes is the host of MSNBC's All In with Chris Hayes. He is the author of a fascinating new book. It is titled The Siren's Call, in which he argues that technology companies have triggered a national crisis by developing products that significantly reduce our attention spans and, as a result, may be dividing us. Good morning to you.
It's good to see you.
So help us understand this, because we talk a lot about social media on this broadcast. We talk about X on one side and Instagram on the other. So there's sort of two theories of the case, I think, running through this book. One is just about the role of of the media, but also the role of how it's dividing us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to think about it is that attention, in an information-rich environment, right, which is the information economy, Herb Simon has this insight back in the 1970s that attention is the scarce resource, right? Information consumes attention. Information is basically infinite and replicable. There's tons of data out there. The thing that's finite is our attention. It can only be in one place or another. And so attention becomes actually the really important currency of the age. And in fact, when you look at companies like Google and Meta, right, what are they actually monetizing? They're actually monetizing our attention, much more than they're monetizing information. When you get competitive attention markets, right, what you are driving towards is the most outrageous, the most negative, the thing that is triggering the part of our brainstem that is most conditioned for threat, right, and the lurid. And so we're all sort of in this universe of these incredibly intense attention markets that are always going to kind of drive to that lowest.
So that's the question. Is there a business model that you could even imagine that would allow us to use these type of services and yet not play the attention, either be in the attention business, but without having to take everything to the extent that it goes, whether you're on the far right or far left?
One of the things I think is worth considering about the evolution of digital life is that the first iteration of the internet was an entirely commercial universe with AOL, Prodigy, CompuServe, right? And AOL was the belle of the ball, and of course it was like the largest company, and they bought Time Warner. And that was actually replaced by a non-commercial open version of the internet. The thing that gave us Wikipedia, Mark Andreessen's developing of the Mosaic web browser, was that all of a sudden you busted out of these small platforms, right, which was AOL and CompuServe, and you actually had an open internet that was fundamentally in its interactions non-commercial in the space you occupied. We've now gone back to a universe in which we're all operating in commercial spaces all the time. Right? So the platform in every instance has a goal, which is to maximize the use of your attention. It does not actually have to be that way. I mean, there are non-commercial
so that's where I wanted to go with this, when you say it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, because we had an open internet before. There are still platforms that are relatively open. There's still protocols that are relatively open. Podcasts is a great example.
It's clunky, and it's harder to get to some of this stuff.
Exactly, and that's the sort of trade-off, right? But podcasts are a great example, right? Podcasts operate on an open protocol. They operate off the back of RSS, which was developed years ago, that like anyone can use. And when you hear the phrase, wherever you get your podcasts, right? That's like the openness of the old internet, that it's not contained in a platform that in every moment is trying to monetize your attention.
Look, I agree with you. I think that is totally the goal of this, and we feed off these negative things. But I would also say that the precursor to what we see with the social media companies right now are the cable companies. The cable companies do the same thing.
Totally, yes.
And for decades, people were blaming the cable companies, particularly the far right and the far left, in terms of politics, was saying the cable companies
are monetizing this. Yes,
and they're doing the same thing, and they're trying to rile people up and give this rabid sort of delivery, and that's why the ratings were so good for cable companies.
And believe me, I mean, I live this every day.
I know, that's why I'm.
And the thing that I think, the way that I think about our role as journalists, right, is like the Fed's dual mandate.
Okay. Right? This is interesting. I like this. Coming to squawk with some real
central bankers have a dual mandate, and they have to basically deal with two goals that are in tension with each other, which is why it's hard to be a central banker, right? They want to keep unemployment low, they want to keep inflation low, the growth high, right? And those sometimes there's trade-offs between them. In journalism, what I'm trying to do is like keep people's attention and also give them the tools for self-governance and information.
You're just mad that somebody is out angering the crowds and getting them more addicted on social media than we do on television.
Well, no, because I actually think there's like an actual civic role for journalism that's being destroyed.
I agree, but I would also say that some of the far right and far left that we see in politics is not straight up journalism. It is taking a side and a perspective and then heating and fomenting.
Totally, and I think that attentional incentives for that are enormous. I mean, you see it all the time. Our politics are defined by a kind of trolling now.
So where do you land ultimately on the sort of community notes of it all? And both in the sort of X land and increasingly now it's going to be in the meta land. I ask because there's an element to which you can argue that there's sort of like a truth to it, right? It's everybody can just put up whatever they want. There are no journalism, no gatekeepers. Someone on the street down here will see somebody do something and they'll just write in that this is what just happened. Whether it's, and it might be right, it might be wrong. Somebody might have a video of it, but that there were no the gatekeepers are all of us. Are we better? Who is the better gatekeeper? No, I actually think this is the fundamental question, right? Do we want gatekeepers? Do we not want gatekeepers? And I'm very mixed views of the situation. I have very, very mixed views of it because, interestingly, I go back actually to 2020, and I think about vaccines. I think about, by the way, there was like a whole meme craze. And, you know, someone like myself, I would come on the air and I would say, be careful, folks. I think this is a little bit anxiety-producing. And people would say, I don't need you to be my parent. Stop trying to protect me. And by the way, you're trying to protect me from the man. You're trying to protect the man. You're not trying to protect me. And it's a very interesting sort of like flip of what I thought the responsibilities of a journalist were supposed to be. People said, you're not supposed to be protecting us from these things. We actually want to see them. We want to know it. Anyway.
Well, so here's my thing.
I don't know the answer.
So I write in the book about what I call attentional regimes, like a debate, Lincoln Douglas, right? Like any social interaction, any meeting, right, has an attentional regime, like who can speak when, what you're talking about, an agenda. And that's necessary because attention is a means towards some end. What we're seeing is when you have a breakdown of attentional regimes, the end itself is attention. It's just getting attention and nothing else, right? So part of what I'm talking when you talk about gatekeepers, it's like, what is the purpose of whatever given platform is? Is it just to maximize the seconds of eyeballs on it? Or is it to do something else, like give people the tools they need to invest or to like run a democracy?
But ultimately, the additional choice leaves the choice up to the viewer. Do you want to spend more time with this gated community where people you decide you trust or don't trust are feeding you things, or do you want to have access to anything and everything? And that's
sure. And I think I think people can go both ways, right? There's different parts of ourselves. I think what we've ended up doing is basically reinventing the village rumor. Right. So the idea that like you're the media is like, yeah, well, we've had that for hundreds of years. Right. The Salem witch trials was you are the media. She looks like a witch. Like we've definitely tried that before.